So good morning to everybody, and welcome to this information session. This is an important milestone for the Towards IPOS team because this is our very first ever public webinar, a public sharing information session. So you are helping us make history today by being with us for this event. So in order to orient you in the webinar today, I'm going to provide some context and then take you through the objectives of today's webinar. And then after that, we will introduce you to a status update on the IPOS project, the genesis and where we are now and the way that the project has evolved. And then we'll go through a section on the consultation process, which we're launching today as part of this webinar. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers where you will be able to reflect your thoughts or ask any questions that you may have. So the context for today's conversation, the IPOS started 3 years ago, and it was to better leverage knowledge to accelerate ocean sustainability action. The EU recognized and supported this and funded a project to establish the terms of reference for the IPOS, for the future IPOS. These terms of reference aim to be presented at UNOC 3 next year in June. And the global consultation process that we are commencing with this webinar will continue for the next 3 months, and then we'll obtain perspectives from communities on these status updates. I'm going to, during the objectives of today's webinar, is to share a reminder on the genesis of the IPOS, to present these ideas of this emerging blueprint, these terms of reference that we are working on, and then to respond to your questions. Next. Thank you. So a status update on the IPOS. Where are we now and where have we come from? So as a really great starting point, which is slightly alarming, is this new State of the Ocean report that's just been published by UNESCO IOC, which confirms that eutrophication is persisting and continues to increase, that the amount of plastic in the ocean has significantly worsened and looks to be continuing to increase at a worsening rate than it already has escalated. The ocean continues its role as the most important carbon sink, absorbing large amounts of carbon, which are predicted to increase ocean acidification by more than 100% by the end of the century. Ocean warming from the surface down to the abyss is happening at an unprecedented rate, and this rate is accelerating. And what is alarming about this specifically is that the jump in ocean warming, the jump between previous records and the current record for this year was not predicted by scientists. So it's going in a direction we don't even understand. And there is also no doubt that global sea levels are rising and that this will accelerate into the future. And despite this, the state of the ocean that is so deteriorated, we are still very far from achieving our global targets that we have collectively agreed as humanity to comply with for ocean sustainability. And this slide shows you just how far we are from actually reaching our targets. This map should be green, and it is orange and red for the progress on SDG 14. This gives us 5 years to turn this map into green. It's taken us this long to achieve not very much. So it's really worrying. And as a result of this, the IPOS team started, we had this core assumption, which is that, of course, political will is necessary to shift the needle on ocean sustainability. The decisions have to be made by policymakers. But we also have this core assumption that better knowledge and better access to usable knowledge, functional knowledge, would help policymakers accelerate the implementation of SDG 14 and other global targets. So this assumption is based on a series of studies that we've done in the Towards IPOS team, including a paper and then also a seascape assessment, which looked at global ocean knowledge. And we found that through these studies, ocean knowledge is there, but it's in pockets in different reports. It's distributed in multiple different reports, in pockets, sometimes repetitive. The information is siloed. It's not actionable. It's just a very generic state of the ocean. It doesn't help policymakers make decisions or understand what is needed in order to make the right decisions. It's not written in a language that policymakers understand or can connect with. It's too scientific and too complicated. It doesn't respond to their priorities. In other words, it's not demand-driven. It's just the state of the ocean, but policymakers have specific issues they're dealing with. And also the knowledge base that we have at a global level is not sufficiently inclusive. It does not include all of the knowledge that we have, including indigenous communities and local people. Then, as a result of this core assumption in our work, we commenced this project on the IPOS, and the genesis has been quite quick, actually, if you consider that we really only started working and presenting the first concept in 2022. So from 2022 to mid-2024, we have already held several events around the world. We have presented high-level conversations at COP27 and COP28. We've moderated ministers at the event at the SIDS for U Ocean. We've received support from the European Commission and generated an enormous amount of interest in the project. And I think there is a recognition that something is needed, something additional is needed at the science policy interface if we're to have any hope of meeting our sustainability targets. On the basis of this work, the European Commission recognized that this is necessary to support the science policy interface and funded a project for called Towards IPOS. And we're working in a wonderful consortium of partners, you can see at the bottom of the slide. And collectively, we raised, the European funded us with €1 million to establish the terms of reference for the IPOS. We have 3 core packages in the tender process. The first is to continue the feasibility study that we started in the seascape assessment, which I mentioned a moment ago, to continue that and to cover social and economic aspects as well. The second part is really the engine of the IPOS and the focus of today's conversation, which is how to design the terms of reference for the IPOS. How will this new animal actually work in the ocean space? What will it look like? What will its deliverables be? Who will host it? How will its secretariat work? And then the third function is to really make this IPOS real, to bring it to the world in a powerful way with a really good brand identity and an excellent communication strategy that engages stakeholders and continues to gather strong political support. And in the interim period, since we've commenced the project and while we're working on these terms of reference, prior to the IPOS becoming official, Towards IPOS becoming an official IPOS, which will happen a little bit later in next year, we hope, and Maxime will take you through that in a moment. We have set up this interim governance structure to manage our relationships and our stakeholder engagement processes and to ensure that we are ready from the beginning conducting IPOS in a really inclusive way where we have taken account of all of the stakeholders that are interested, of all of the rights holders that have a role to play in the ocean, and where we are building scientific consensus, which is so important that we have scientific community with us while we engage political momentum. So to briefly explain to you how this governance works, at the moment, the core team sits in the center, well, on the right, but in the center of the egg, which is the consortium team that I explained to you a moment ago. We then have an advisory board comprised of some of the world's best ocean experts. Some are from other panels, other global panels. And then we have a knowledge committee, which is comprised half of members of a scientific coalition, which we'll tell you about also in a moment, and half from strategic partners such as youth, civil society, knowledge holders, rights holders. And then we've established several special envoys to represent the ocean in the global context, because we're a small team, we can't be everywhere. And then we have a wider grouping of IPOS friends that are really interested in following and tracking our progress and waiting and supporting us towards our final presentation at UNOC.
Thank you, Tanya. Can you hear me? Hello. So hello, I'm Maxime Delille. I'm the General Secretary of the Ocean Sustainability Foundation, and I'm going to explain where we are now and what are the next step. So really our objective is to present the term of reference of the IPOS at UNOC 3, so in a bit less than a year in Nice. And there it will be presenting the concept and the vision. What will we be? How will we work? What's the governance? What the financing mechanism, etc., etc. So we have a year to go. And by then, what are we doing? We are doing an inclusive approach, really to co-produce this concept with 5 things in parallel. The first thing we do, and we've been doing for long, is benchmarks, literature reviews, analyzing, making sure that we design something that makes sense for the ocean, for people living out of the ocean, that we really bring value, and we build bridges with other existing bodies. We know there is a gap. We want to fill this gap and make sure we are working with the rest of the community. Second thing we do a lot is political and scientific outreach. We want and we need to have a coalition of states with us. We want to have like a community of scientists and knowledge holders with us. And we also need to guarantee that there is a hosting structure, a UN body which says, yes, the IPOS is hosted under myself, so we can be legitimate and durable. Third thing we do, and we are starting today, is a consultation. We've been a small team for the past months or the past years. Now we want to enlarge the scope and to welcome anyone willing to join. So we are starting this, and Adrien will present it. Two other things we do: event and workshop, to meet as many people as we can, to communicate about the IPOS, to make people together. I'll show where we were and where we're going to be in the coming months. And the last thing we do is pilot projects. We think that we need not to be only on papers and concept, but we need to try from now some ideas we have. So for specific subjects in specific countries, we've already started some projects to make sure that our ideas actually make sense in the real life. So now I'm going to detail this project. I'm going to detail first this political outreach we managed to have. So we already have a growing support within the political community with some powerful one. The UNOC is behind us. The European Commission is officially and financially supporting the concept. The French Republic also is behind us from the very beginning. And the new one is China. The president of China, I think it's 5 weeks ago, said that it's a project that we need to push. And then there is a growing global momentum. 5 organizations have officially expressed their interest: Morocco, Palau, Monaco, Spain, and the Pacific Ocean Commissioner. They did it publicly in events like at COP28, for example. And then we have a large range of ongoing discussion with states, large states like the USA, small island states like Mauritius and Seychelles, and this is growing and growing. This was the political support. We also have like a support from the scientific community. So we have built a coalition of scientific institutions. We are not talking about individuals, but about the institutions themselves signing and saying, yes, I want to push for the IPOS. They are coming from all continents of the world, from Europe, and the latest one yesterday, we have the logo is not there yet, a new university from South Africa who joined. And the role is that support the IPOS, help us co-design the IPOS, and once it will be ready, it will build a network of scientists and experts that will be leveraging for our mission. 2 other things. If you look at the right, we are also building bridges with other existing efforts. IPCC, IPBES, World Ocean Assessment, IRP, also the Ocean Panel are already existing, powerful, amazing organizations that we want to leverage. We are building partnership with them. So it's going to be the road for the coming months. And also engaging a lot with the UN body. Why we do it? It's because we think that to be permanent and to be legitimate, UN is a natural home for us. There are two main options for now. Nothing is clear yet. IOC seems a very, very promising options that we are investigating with the teams. And also the UNEP showed interest, and we'll see if there is a partnership potential with these two organizations. I was talking about pilot projects. I want to discuss about one we are doing. It's one pilot project about deep sea global consultation. Just 4 things that shows kind of what we could test and what we could look like. So we had a demand from the French president, Emmanuel Macron, saying that he wanted us to organize a wide-ranging scientific consultation on the exploitation of deep sea. Then the approach was to gather like a really transdisciplinary and inclusive group of people. You can see like just sociodemographics, so like men and women from every region of the world with natural sciences, 12, social sciences, we have 9 of them. There is a typo here. So a wide range of expertise that are together working on a report, simple report of 20 pages with 2 pages of executive summary. Really, the idea is that for policymakers to have something simple, digestible, holistic, and then to help them also understand, we'll do a range of other deliverables, videos, policy briefs, talking points, really to make sure that they can take the knowledge. And something which was very important also for this project is the timing. There is a General Assembly of the International Seabed Authority on July 2025. So this report will be delivered 4 or 5 months before, so it can be on the time. What's next? So the roadmap is very clear for us. The big milestone is UNOC in June 2025. In the past months, we've already done several events in Monaco, in Barcelona, at SEEDS, and lastly in Costa Rica, in Immersed in Change. We'll be in the coming months at different events, General Assembly of the UN, the 2 COPs, most probably. These are like key moments where we gather people all together. But in parallel, we do this consultation that we are starting today. That will last until October. And in the meantime, yes, the project is like the idea is that we continue the policy outreach and our pilot project. So it was a quick update of where we are coming from and where we are heading to. I think now the core of the discussion is to tell you a bit more what are we gonna do, and this all the objective of this consultation. And Adrien, I give you the floor. Adrien is a senior advisor of the OSF and the IPOS project for long, and I give you the mic.
Thank you very much, Tanya and Maxime. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So indeed, now we have talked a lot about how we are building the IPOS, but the question is, what is it going to look like? So I'm going to still continue with a little bit of process to explain in a more detailed way how we are organizing this consultation, but most importantly, then I'm going to walk you through the emerging hypotheses and ideas that we have about building the IPOS that we want to test through this consultation. So the consultation, we are leveraging 3 main channels: 1 online consultation, a number of targeted workshops and bilateral meetings, and 1 offsite seminar. When it comes to the online consultation, our objective is to gather input from around 200 respondents from diverse backgrounds, geographies, and demographics, and we'll tap into our IPOS existing networks, but we'll do our best to proactively access people outside of our usual circles. How is it going to look like? It's going to be 25 questions. This consultation online will open end of this week and will stay open until mid-September. and it will take the form of an online survey that takes roughly 30 minutes to fill in, where we present our current assumptions in the spirit of what I'm going to show you. And we'd like to have your reactions and feedback on what we have proposed. And this is what we are going to focus on today. Then for the targeted workshops and bilateral meetings, the idea is to go slightly deeper with a shorter amount of practitioners and experts through typically 1 or 2 hours meetings. And finally, the objective is to leverage the input from channel A and B to develop an updated version of these terms of reference that we will test with a small group of advisors to the IPOS to stress test and strengthen around late September as a last input into these terms of reference that will then present to countries to get their feedback and hopefully support an adoption. So the online survey, what can you expect? There will be 4 sections. First, about the context, and where we will discuss the need for improved ocean knowledge science society policy interface. So in the spirit of the findings and considerations that Tanya presented some minutes ago. And here we want to confirm with you that our priorities and our understanding on the space is correct and well prioritized. Then really the core of this survey is to test our proposed solutions. So some emerging ideas for an IPOS, where we'll walk you through the mission statement, vision statement, and the services of the IPOS. Section 3, we will then invite you to take a step back, and once you have digested our general approach, we want your help in understanding and assessing if this positioning is adding value to the existing ecosystem, and how can we make sure that this is useful and value-added contribution to the space to fulfill this acceleration of the achievement of the SDG 14 targets. And last but not least, I said 2 minutes ago that we wanted to make sure we access other circles. So we will also invite you to nominate other stakeholders from your own networks that you think should receive this survey. So now that we are done with the process, time to get to the meaty part of what is our current thinking about what should this IPOS look like and how could it operate. The first thing is that we have discussed with the team through lots of iterations, discussions with external partners, and through all those events that Maxime was mentioning, we have identified a number of structuring design choices to help us find the right niche where we can add maximum value. So these 3 big structuring design choices are the following. The first one is in terms of primary target audiences. We believe an IPOS could make sense by targeting in priority states and group of states, while still considering, of course, other stakeholder groups like civil society, scientific community, local communities, and private sector as key partners and co-contributors, but not necessarily as our primary targets. The second design choice is to focus on achieving or accelerating the achievement of international ocean sustainability targets and frameworks like the SDG 14 or the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And the third big design choice is to envision the IPOS as a global platform. So countries or group of countries from all over the world could be soliciting the IPOS for assistance in better accessing and leveraging the knowledge to meet those ocean targets. With those 3 design choices in mind, plus all the considerations that were presented before, we are today thinking as the following vision statement for the IPOS, where we envision a world where political action towards ocean sustainability is enabled by access to timely, contextually relevant, actionable, inclusive, and verified knowledge. So this is the kind of world we dream of, where this better access to knowledge will really help countries and states thrive and accelerate the implementation of those sustainability targets. So now the big question is, what does that mean in concrete terms? How do we operationalize this vision, and what would be the IPOS doing in practical terms? So to get there, first of all, we wanted to share with you a number of elements, or you could call them ingredients, that we want to put together to make the recipe for a successful IPOS. And those elements have been identified through a mix of all the inputs Maxime presented earlier. So desktop analysis and literature review, interviews, workshops, events. And so currently we have identified 8 of those elements, or you could call them key success factors, that are likely to become really the heart of IPOS DNA. The first one is this notion of being demand-driven. That means that we really want to be responding to key knowledge questions that have been asked to the IPOS. So we are really focusing on the priorities of decision makers and scientists and other ocean actors. The second core element is that we see the IPOS more as a knowledge broker that will be leveraging existing data, science, and knowledge, but really focusing on the aggregation and synthesis of this knowledge to answer those specific demands. We don't necessarily foresee the IPOS as a knowledge builder in the academic sense of it. Third, we want to co-produce and to co-broker this knowledge in the most inclusive way. And this is one of the shortcomings we have identified in most of the current general environmental assessment processes today. And we really want to ensure that the voices of local and indigenous communities and other marginalized groups are really leveraged actively in the development of those recommendations or options. And we also want to make sure that we have this transdisciplinary approach where we include not only scientists, but other knowledge holders from the civil society and private sector. Fourth, synergistic. This we could also rename it like systems approach. We really want to ensure that when we look at the ocean, we recognize the interconnections between climate and biodiversity. We recognize the interconnection between land and sea. And we also recognize the interconnections between ocean topics and other economic and social topics, where decision makers, when they take a decision on the ocean, they have to make lots of trade-offs or considerations around other policies and other topics that are under their mandate. 5, actionability. This is really one thing that has been recurringly coming back through our interviews, especially with those decision makers, is that too often the knowledge is excellent in providing considerations about the state of the ocean. It's really good about providing general and global high-level recommendations or suggestions, but oftentimes it's missing much more concrete and contextualized proposed solutions and options that could be presented in an accessible and plain language to those decision makers. 6, timeliness. This is really the essence. Oftentimes we have a disconnect between the policy cycle and the knowledge production cycle. So we really want to maximize the consistency between the priorities in terms of calendar of those states with the knowledge the IPOS would bring. 7, importantly, the IPOS will make a difference if it can keep an independence. So of course, we want to ensure that the IPOS outputs are relevant to the state's needs, but we need to make sure that we also keep this independence through, for instance, a set of guiding principles that will also maximize the credibility and legitimacy, which is point 8, where on top of all those 7 elements, including independence, we believe that credibility and legitimacy will be maximized through partnerships with internationally recognized institutions and clear and transparent procedures throughout the way the IPOS work. So the obvious question that we have been asking ourselves once we had identified those 8 key elements or key success factors was who is already combining 8 of those 8 elements in this knowledge decision interface ecosystem. So it's an oversimplified, very directional analysis here that I'm presenting, but in simple terms, we've looked at global environmental assessments and we have reviewed around 35 of them. We have looked at a number of demand-driven international organizations some of them being a bit more regional. We have looked at international NGOs, and we have looked at private consultancies. The realization is that each of those stakeholder groups is really excellent on a number of those key elements, but none of them is today really activating all of them to their maximum potential. So the first big learning from this analysis is that there is still room for a new organization that is trying to put in practice those 8 key elements. However, the second key learning is that you still see a lot of dark green, which is really what we consider a high performance against one key ingredient. And so whatever the IPOS will be, it will have to maximize the synergies and really leverage the strength of all those existing organizations on some of those key elements. And so trying to bring together all these key elements, we have developed this mission statement, which is a slightly more operationalized way of explaining our vision. So the mission for the IPOS would be to operate with an inclusive and systemic approach and to broker knowledge to deliver independent, timely, and actionable support in response to countries wanting to accelerate their implementation of international ocean sustainability targets and frameworks. And so here, every word has its importance. So you will recognize a number of the key elements around inclusivity, about systems approach, really in the way of working, the verbs of being a broker, deliver independent and actionable support are really important. And all of that being done in response to countries who proactively came to the IPO saying that they want to accelerate their implementation of their SDG 14 or Global Biodiversity Framework targets. Last but not least, we went one level even deeper, trying to think about how that could materialize in terms of concrete services. And again, all of that are really ideas that we want to test with you through this consultation, and they are completely open to be tweaked, changed, updated, and enriched. But as of today, we were thinking about 3 main services that could be delivered by the IPOS. The first one that we named Ocean Action Request is somehow already what we are testing with the deep sea mining project or deep sea consultation project that Maxime presented. It will be a service where countries can submit a specific request for ocean knowledge. And then after an evaluation and prioritization process, the IPOS will set up a hybrid working group with a mix of scientists, local communities, civil society, private sector experts to provide a synthesis done in an iterative and with a strong dialogue with the country requesting this service to provide in a timely manner actionable insights and options for actions to countries. So here really the target users would be states or group of states. And to be timely, we consider that we need to stick to less than 12 months before the request, after the request is prioritized to provide those insights and options. The second service is really complementary to the first one. What we've heard from many decision makers and other stakeholders is that countries don't always know exactly what they need to ask to a service like Ocean Action Request, and are not always aware of the next big thing that has been identified, for instance, by the civil society or by the scientific world. And so this Ocean Sentinel service, you can imagine it as some kind of a whistleblowing system where we would gather inputs and suggestions and alerts from all those non-state actors on topics that they believe should be prioritized by governments. And then the IPOS will centralize and anonymize all those suggestions and proactively present them to the relevant states, encouraging them, of course, to solicit the IPOS on those specific topics through our other services. And here we will publish in a very transparent way a report every 6 months to really highlight those big priorities and suggestions and inputs from all those non-state actors. And finally, conscious that the political world and policymakers oftentimes needs answers and needs advice and knowledge in an even more pressing manner than the 12 months envisioned in Service 1, we were thinking about a third complementary service that we called Ocean Quick Connect, where the IPOS would be providing really rapid response to urgent requests from countries that need a quick access to synthesize verified information on ocean topics. And that could take, for instance, the shape of the preparation of an international negotiation where a delegation would ask the IPOS to help synthesize and prepare a neutral basis of knowledge to help them prepare their negotiation in the most accurate and efficient way. And so here the idea would be to provide a response in a matter of weeks, again, for states or a group of states. So that are all the kind of emerging ideas and hypotheses that we are thinking about with on how to operationalize the IPOS. Of course, once we have more support and inputs and feedback, and we have iterated on those considerations, a number of elements will also need to take place and to be defined in these terms of reference, including more precisely the official governance, how decisions are being made, by which committees, who are members of those committees, how are they nominated, how often do they meet, and so on. What would be the secretariat who manages this whole system and is managing those specific services? What kind of profiles do we need? How many people do we need, and where should they be based? Of course, we need to detail also the financial model and the kind of business model for the IPOS. So once we have stabilized exactly the way of working and the services, we can budget like how much does that cost to produce one of those services, and how many of them do we want to provide. So we have a view on what would be the cost base to operate the IPOS in an efficient way. And then we need to think about the financing mechanism to fulfill this budget. So how much money would be coming from countries, from other kinds of donors, like international organizations or private foundations? How much of this funding will be general versus earmarked? So we still have a lot of work to do on really the practical implications and the practical way of working. But really the core of the consultation that we are presenting today and launching on Friday is first of all, where are we going directionally, and what kind of services the IPOS would be delivering to maximize value. My last comment is really to insist on the fact that the way we have been designing those first ideas was really guided by the fact that the last thing we want is to create unnecessary competition or duplication of efforts. I think the SDG maps presented by Tanya are a clear call or a clear indication that more action is needed. And it's not about challenging what is being done today. It's more about adding capacity, adding creative and new ways of working that will complement and amplify what is already being done today. And so the IPOS does not pretend to be the solution. It pretends to be another tool in the toolbox that will help accelerate action on the SDG 14 and action to reverse the trend on the ocean health degradation. So with that, you will see in the chat, and maybe it's already there, a link where you can register and provide your name and email address if you want to be receiving the link to fulfill this detailed online survey that will take 30 minutes. And so the link, the link to register is now, and the survey will then be sent to you on Friday. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Adrian. So we have two questions in the chat which you may want to respond to, Adrian. I'll read it to you. There's a question from Sonia Batten from Pisces saying, what I think should be more clearly articulated is the relationship with IOC's UN decade to make clear that IPOS will support its efforts and not compete with it. It is the UN decade of ocean science for sustainable development with some very similar language to IPOS. So if IPOS is to have a home with the UN at IOC, then the roles of IPOS and the UN decade of ocean science need to be very clearly delineated so that contributing organizations know where to focus resources and duplication of effort is minimized. Is this operationalization of the UN Decade of Ocean Science, for example? So I'm sure that you'd like to respond to that, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sonia, and I could not agree more. And so that's why we have been engaging already a lot with the teams of the IOC UNESCO to really take their inputs and see how the IPOS could be as aligned and as synergistic as possible with the Ocean Decade. Maybe the only caveat here, and to help you understand the kind of challenge we are facing, is we say that we would love the IPOS to be hosted within the UN umbrella, but here it's a bit of a chicken and the egg situation where on one hand, we want to develop these terms of reference and blueprints, if you will, of the IPOS, anticipating that we will be hosted within the UN system. And at the same time, this is a decision that can only be made by member states and by, for instance, the Executive Council of the IOC that will have the final say to say, yes, it makes sense, or no, it doesn't make sense. And to get to this conclusion, we need to convince them that the IPOS is adding value and that we have some concrete proposal. And so here the challenge is we want to proactively anticipate how to maximize those synergies, but we don't want to give the impression to countries that we are bypassing their decisions and already taking as a given that the IPOS will be hosted under the IOC. And so this is the kind of fine line we need to find of proactively anticipating all the possible synergies and good intelligence with the Ocean Decade without giving the impression we already consider ourselves as part of the UN system.
Thank you, Adrian. There is another question from David Laurent, which is, will there be an official mandate from states, which I think we've partly answered, and how will they be involved in the governance, and what will be the difference with IPCC and IPBES? Would you like to take it, Adrian, or shall I?
Or maybe I leave it to you?
Go for it, yeah.
All right. So thank you, David, for this question. So as Adrian has explained, that we intend and hope to be hosted under the UN system. So indeed, there will be an official mandate from the UN General Assembly or from the General Assembly of the IOC to establish a role for the IPOS, to have a mandate to operate at a global level. And this is critically important from a legitimacy perspective and from a credibility perspective. If states are going to listen to IPOS science and IPOS options that we present, then there needs to be a mandate at the UN level. So indeed, there will be. In terms of the governance structure will very much depend, I think, on the hosting institution, which we are working on actively, very proactively. And in the process of designing, we only have our interim governance structure. So the final governance structure will be designed together with the hosting institution. And I'm sure that states will certainly have a role in the plenary of the IPOS once it's established. In terms of the difference between the IPCC and IPBES, IPOS is quite different actually to IPCC and IPBES in that those processes firstly focus obviously on climate and biodiversity respectively, but also those processes deliver the state of climate or the state of biodiversity. They do not respond specifically to priority topics of states, and they don't relate specifically either to meeting global sustainability targets. They provide an information base. The intention with IPOS is to use that information base because it's there and it's excellent, and to act as a connector and a boundary organization to use all of that knowledge and provide really credible scientific answers in a synthesized way and an actionable way to guide individual member states' questions. So I hope that that's answered that question for you. Shall I continue with the questions, Maxime? Do you want to jump in at any point?
Well, I can take the next one if you want on the accountability and transparency. We fully agree that it's very important, and your point is right. Like if you were there like 10 days ago, we had a fourth service, which was a not annual report, but biannual report on the hot topics of the priority of the 2 years on the ocean matters and on what the IPOS has done. So we decided to remove it because for us it's kind of absolutely normal that we have to do it. Is it every UNOX, so every 3 years? Is it aligned with the state of the ocean report of the IOC? Maybe, but definitely yes. We'll provide some flagship report from time to time to make sure that we track our impacts and we give to the world and to policymakers, but to a larger community, what are the hot topics. What we feel is that it's very difficult for policymakers that usually have other aspects in their baskets. They also talk about agriculture, they talk about shipping, they are not expert about the ocean, to have the overview of what are the burning topics. So from time to time, we'll deliver this kind of dual report of what are the burning topics and what have we done in the past years. So for sure, we'll work on that.
And to complement what Maxime said, if we talk about an annual report, let's be clear that it will not be a copy or a competition to, for instance, the State of the Ocean report by IOC, of the World Ocean Assessment, or special reports from IPCC or IPBES that are really regular assessments of where do we stand in terms of ocean metrics, ocean health indicators, pressures, and so on. The kind of report that the IPOS would be presenting, in the spirit of what Tanya said, that differentiates the IPOS from IPCC and IPBES, would be more about the learnings and the best practices we have experienced when it comes to implementing action by states. So what were successful case studies of countries acting upon a specific SDG target, new processes to better implement policies in an inclusive way and anticipate potential resistance to change. That could be best practices in assembling different types of knowledge holders, mixing groups with local community representatives and indigenous people representatives, together with academic bodies and the private sector and civil society. So that would be much more what have we learned that can benefit others on the how than on the what. And the what is already done excellently by all those other reports I've just mentioned.
And regarding maybe the last question from Riku, definitely your last point about how the IPOS can allow visibility to critical research. This is a role of the Sentinel service we want to have, that bring to policymakers new ideas, warnings, information from the scientific community and from the civil society, so with this kind of brokers, neutral and legitimate flag we'll have here as other IPOS. So maybe policymakers will be able to listen to it a bit more. And also to your point, yes, we agree that it's having access to knowledge is not enough. We need political will for sure, but the mandate we'd like to have is that at our scale, focusing on this missing part of the equation. The equation is longer than just knowledge. We know that, but we think that this needs to be reinforced, and that's what we are focusing on.
Yeah. Thanks. Maybe I can just add a little bit to that on transformative, for taking a transformative perspective, just to affirm, Riku, that we are intending to really innovate. This is the IPOS is an innovative idea and concept that's intended to catalyze and accelerate change and to really move forward on ocean sustainability. So transformative perspectives are critical and important, and certainly will be taken as part of our core DNA. Thank you for raising that.
Any other question? It was
so
one
then
question.
we can only encourage you to register to receive the survey. And so you will have a second opportunity to look at our emerging ideas with slightly more detail than what I've presented. and respond to the corresponding questions. Sorry, Maxime, you were saying?
That we're gonna send the slides if you want to read them again. You have also a great opportunity, if you wish, is that at 6 p.m. tonight, you can come again for the same presentation, because we did it in 2 time zones, so the Americans could listen to it. But no, just saying that the slides will come, and we'll be more than happy to engage with you. The idea of this online survey is that we can have a massive number of people, but definitely if you want to contact us directly, don't hesitate also. Tanya, you want to conclude?
No, just thank you so much to everyone for attending and making this little moment in history for us, for the Towards IPOS team. It was really an honor to be here with you, and we look forward to you registering for the survey and continuing to engage with you.
There is a last question, and we have 6 minutes, so let's go for it. It's a question about the private sector. How we engage with it. Adrien, you want to take it?
Yeah, I'm happy to take it, and I'm really glad that you asked that, because when Tanya said that we want to be innovative, I think the engagement with the private sector could be one way to also bridge different worlds in a slightly different manner to better equip or assist policymakers in taking decisions. Because the reality is, one of the shortcomings or shortfalls we have identified is today, if you just have academic scientists telling a government you should do X, Y, or Z, oftentimes it does not necessarily take into account the potential priorities or reactions or vested interests or ongoing efforts of the private sector. And so you end up with decision makers having one message from the science, another message from the private sector, another message from the civil society, another message from whatever stakeholder groups. And of course, this is their job to combine those insights, but it's not always easy. And so through those hybrid working groups, we really want to make sure that from the beginning, when a request is made by a state to the IPOS, we engage and embark private sector representatives. And so that's why we are already discussing a lot with, for instance, the UN Global Compact, which is already trying to do this bridge between the UN system and the private sector to maximize the engagement with those types of stakeholder groups who will contribute in formulating the options and the responses. And the point is not to bias academic knowledge. It's more to say, if the academic knowledge says you should do this or you should explore this option, at least keep in mind that this is what the private sector is already doing, or what are the potential blockages or the financial implications that such a policy decision will have on the private sector. So it will help better apprehend the kind of trade-offs and the implementation of those solutions by decision makers.
Thanks, Adrian. Okay, I think maybe we can wrap up. It's great. It was a really wonderful session. Thank you so much to everyone for being here.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you to the team who organized this and are behind the screen. You can't see their face, but they've been working on the technical part of it. And it's always a lot of work. So thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.